for decades, I had a recurring dream. And I kept noticing with amusement that I was having this dream over and over. And it was a dream where I'd be like in an airport and I'd get on the wrong plane and the plane would land in Stuttgart. Or I'd be on the right plane, but there was a mechanical difficulty and we would land in Stuttgart. Or I'd be on the plane and it was hijacked and we would land
in Stuttgart.
Now, and I'm thinking, why? Why? I don't have any connection with this place. And I hadn't thought about that dream in years. And that night, after posing the question, where should I go? I had the dream again. So I bought a plane ticket. I have a friend, who lives outside of Frankfurt. I said, I need to go explore something about this dream. Would you come with me to Stuttgart? And she said, yeah. And within another month of that, a series of dreams led me to discover where my Keller family, my father's family, came from. And to discover that I've got great-great-grandparents and great-great-great-grandparents who are buried in an existing, unharmed Jewish cemetery a half an hour out of Stuttgart.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernie Beitman, psychiatrist interested in meaningful coincidences and writing a book on psychotherapy for the collective human organism, among other things. Our guest today and I had a nice coincidence. I was really be able to explain it a little bit. He has a book called Shechinah at the Art Institute, Words, Worry, and Wonder. He plays with words. He's a rabbi. He plays around with stuff like ideas and stuff. It's fun. And he sent me the book, and it started off with a story of his being at the Chicago Art Institute and seeing a famous painting about Seurat, a pointillistic painter in France who'd was part of the Impressionist group. It had something a little different. It's a bunch of people sitting on an island off the Seine River in Paris, and they're having a picnic on a Sunday afternoon. It's a famous painting. I've always loved it and went to that painting when I went to the Chicago Art Museum. And the book starts off with that. And I go, whoa, wow, we got a synchronicity going on here. So I did the bad thing about asking him how that happened.
No, you're not going to reveal this.
That's the way we got to do this. Is like, how did that happen?
Pull back the screen. Pull back the curtain here.
The Wizard of Oz.
And I told you.
Did a lot of smoking.
It's not my favorite painting at the Art Institute, but I chose it because more people could imagine it, could picture it in their minds. And if I had gone with the painting that I love the most at the Art Institute, I would have had to give a much more lesson about what it looked like for people to be able to follow along.
So the coincidence turned out to be not as improbable as I might have experienced it to be. And that's the idea of it. It was still an emotional charge for me because I loved that painting and I'd go to the Art Institute when I was there and look at it. But it was picked because it was a popular painting. So the probability was much higher that I would have a response, a coincidental feeling response. It didn't stop
I cast a wider net and I caught you.
you devil, you. You did. You catched me, Irwin. You got me. So that's why it's important that when you try to understand what makes meaningful coincidences happen, you've got to ask some details, if you can, of the other person involved. And you may see an explanation that is surprising in that it increases the probability of it happening. So That's the beginning. And let me tell you a little bit about Rabbi Irwin. Uh, uh, Rabbi Irwin Keller has served as a spiritual leader of the Congregation Ner Shalom in Sonoma County, California since 2008, and as founder and faculty of the Taproot Community since 2017. He authored Chicago's first comprehensive human rights law. Chicago's first comprehensive human rights law. That's a big thing. In effect now since 1989, and served at the helm of the AIDS Legal Referral Panel at the San Francisco Bay Area. He is founder of the Kinsey Sicks, America's favorite Dragapella Beautyshop Quartet. Dragapella
You got it.
Beautyshop Quartet. And is mostly the author of, you tell us.
Yeah, I am most recently the author of Shechinah at the Art Institute, Words, Worry, Wonder, which you already mentioned. Um, and yeah, so I sit here somewhere in career number 3.
And as you sit in career number 3, you're going to tell us a coincidence story from Words, Worry, and Wonder.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting me do it this way. I had, my life has been liberally littered with coincidence, some of which have taken me down tremendous rabbit holes and on big life journeys. And this is one that was just so outstanding that it ended up being a short chapter in the book. And so I'm going to share it the way that I shared it in the book. And the chapter is called Such Stuff as Dreams Are Made Of. The dream came while I was performing with the Kinsey Sicks in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. It was hot, and I went to sleep with balcony doors open, overlooking the dazzling blue Bay of Banderas. It was just a month after my mother's death. In fact, it was my first day out of Shloshim, the traditional 30-day mourning period. In my dream, I walked into an old-fashioned European sanatorium. A balding, bespectacled doctor was there with my mother. He had figured out what was wrong with her brain, and it was an easy fix. He'd just gone ahead and done it, and she was instantly okay. Younger and stronger than I'd ever seen her. Luminous, really, and he said there was no longer a reason for her to be there. So I took her in the car, and we sped through towns and forests until we were driving up a mountain rising out of the Aegean Sea, climbing as if up to Olympus itself, Mediterranean blue as far as the eye could see. We drove, sitting side by side in the car, just as we had been at the moment of her stroke. At this point, my waking memory began to seep in. I realized something was not right. I pulled over and told her we'd already sat Shiva for her, and it had been so sad. I fell on her shoulder and she held me while I cried. That's pretty much the entirety of the dream. It was beautiful and sad and not particularly mysterious. I was venting my grief, letting go of the weeks and years of worry about her health and safety. My subconscious giving me a chance to feel some peace. But the thing is, it didn't just feel like my subconscious or like my imagination. It felt messagey, like I know grieving people sometimes experience. It felt like a hello, a message from Mom that she was okay, her suffering healed. And its feeling that way was, for me, a problem because I am, in part, a skeptic. Despite my seeking and my storytelling and connections between worlds and my unending references to angels, I inevitably hold some amount of it within quotation marks. Sometimes I soar aloft, but then, thud, I land back in my flightless day-to-day. Maybe this comes from my mother's Litvak background. The visiting Litvak, or Lithuanian Jew, always plays the role of the doubter in Hasidic tales, scoffing at the Rebbe's wonders until he is won over in the end. Some skepticism is grounded right in our ancient texts. Well, Talmud tells us that an uninterpreted dream is like a
Is like
letter.
a letter unopened.
Exactly, is like a letter left unread. It goes on to say that our dreams are only 1/60th part prophecy. Don't count on your dreams for guidance, imply the rabbis of antiquity. The prophecy in them is negligible. But tantalizingly, negligible is not the same as non-existent. 1/60th is tiny but quantifiable. It's 1 minute of every hour you sleep. That's 6, 7, 8 minutes of prophecy a night, which really isn't so bad. But frustratingly, Talmud gives no guidance as to how to identify which 8 minutes are gold. So I dance the dance of paradox. I long for mystical experience, for conversation with God and angels, and visits to non-corporeal realms. I am also quick to poo-poo the woo-woo. When I experience something, you're making me laugh, Bernie, looking at your face. When I experience, when I experience something transcendent, my next instinct is to douse the experience in a bucket of cold water. But there are times when the mystical is too pressing, too inexplicable, which brings me back to this dream. I woke up and looked out at the blue Mexican water, feeling sad and feeling spoken to. I couldn't shake the sense that she had just been there, holding me. I posted the dream on Facebook, asking, how can we ever tell what is a message and what is our imagining? Instantly, people began weighing in. They all said, of course it's a message, causing me to slam my laptop shut, muttering, how would you know? I got up, dressed, and walked to the mercado for fruit and vegetables. On my way back, I wandered through the old town, wondering how one can ever tell if such an experience is anything more than the heart's wishful thinking, the brain concocting medicine for a spirit in need of it. I posted the how can you ever know for sure question in my head. I posed the how can you ever know for sure question in my head as clearly as one might pose an inquiry to a magic 8-ball. If only one could see a sign of some sort. Just as this request for a sign formed on my lips, I looked up and saw one. I was standing in front of Club Mañana, a former dance club and theater where the Kinsey Sicks had performed for several seasons. Mañana was now for sale, and I was staring at the en venta, the for sale sign. My eyes were drawn down to the large lettered name of the realtor, Marilyn Newman, my mother's maiden name. If I'd seen it in a movie, I would have snickered at its heavy-handedness.
Yeah.
But in real life, I stood there feeling stupid, that because of my insistent grinchiness, a hello from my mother had to come endorsed with a signature before I could believe it. Was this a coincidence? Of course it was. Might I have noticed this gringa realtor's name, this ersatz Marilyn Newman, on some other for sale sign in Puerto Vallarta a year or two earlier? I might have noticed it and called my mother on the phone to say, you'll never guess what I saw today. I might have, but I didn't. I only saw it in the slightly altered consciousness that followed the dream. Rebbe Nachman of Bratslav taught that every blade of grass has a song of its own, a melody that comes from the sweetness of the water and the setting of the pasture. The song of the grass informs the song of the sheep that eat it, and the song of the shepherd who spends days lying on it, watching the sheep. Every living thing, no, everything has a kind of music that we can hear if we open to it. Meanwhile, Talmud teaches us that no blade of grass grows without an angel standing there encouraging it, saying, grow, grow. These two teachings combine to describe a universe full of aliveness, in which on some level everything is talking to everything. The divine talks and creation talks back in a great, gorgeous cacophony not dissimilar to a Jewish dinner table. If we are in the right state of consciousness, we might hear some of the crosstalk that we otherwise would never tune into, the crosstalk that sometimes seems to respond to a question in our hearts, or calls us to action when we need it, or calls us to attention at just the right moment. Sometimes the crosstalk of the universe comes to us in the language of coincidence because it is abundant and we all understand its grammar. Coincidence is the Esperanto of divine communication. At least that's my experience. For others, it might be quiet insight, and who knows, maybe others hear voices. But coincidence, synchronicity, in my experience, is always worth pausing to notice. Or maybe there is no call from the divine. Maybe there is no prophecy in dreams. Maybe coincidence is simply a question of the mathematics of the universe. Maybe all calls, or at least the good ones, come from deep inside, a deep intuition, a place of knowing that sits in our bones and in our kishkis. As they say in the old urban legend, the call is coming from inside the house. That would be okay too. Being locally sourced doesn't prevent us from holding it with the honor that we would if it were undeniably divine. Maybe in holding it that way, it becomes divine. There is one epilogue to this strange story. Another dream about my mother, but I didn't dream this one. It was dreamt by an acquaintance and Kinsey Sicks fan who called me urgently one day because my mother had come to him in a dream
What,
asking.
let me ask you to wait on that one,
Yeah,
Irwin.
yeah, yeah.
I, yeah, I know you're rolling, but that is a transitional, and there's a lot that you've just said there at the last part that is worth a little comment about how these things happen. I mean, that you saw this sign, which is a song. I saw the sign. A lot of people see the sign. The part I want to emphasize and what you have been just talking about is that you asked for a sign.
Yeah.
Just like with artificial intelligence and whatever you call God or the universe or whatever's going on around here, the prompt makes a big difference.
I think if you formulate the prompt, you're going to get a response to the prompt in some way. I mean, in this story, in this experience that I had, the prompt was sort of like a hit me over the head kind of prompt. Uh, you can't get more on point than, in a question about your mother than seeing a sign with your mother's name, first and last name. But um,
In Mexico, yet.
in Mexico, like not a place where there are many Marilyn Newmans. But but I also think if you pose the prompt and you find the ways to be open to the response, I think something is going to direct you
Yeah,
toward the.
yes, and that's what I'm trying to say is that the difference between Irwin the year before wandering around there is that you didn't ask the question. You didn't open your mind to being there to receive. And the ability of when we talk about how these things happen starts with your mind.
It's yeah, there's something about opening up to a particular level of perception that we go through every day of life, and our eyes and our ears and our all of our senses um, absorb so much stimulus, and our brains cancel out most of it because it's too much to bear. Um, and there's something that I think that asking the prompt or opening up in particular ways is what adjusts the brain's perception filters, allows the brain to be open to different kinds of stimulus that it would normally discard.
Agreed. Agreed. And that's so important when we talk about what what's the explanation for meaningful coincidences. Random and mystery, God, universe, a lot of other things, but it starts with the human being somehow willing to look.
Well, right. You can't catch a fish without putting something in the water. You have to dip into the water. You have to sort of, yeah, you have to dip into the water in order to catch whatever there is to catch.
Yeah, and I like these metaphors, and let's go through it a little bit more because I'm struck not just by you, but other people telling stories like this,
Yeah.
emphasizing other than the major explanation, the first explanation, not the only one. There are others that you add. The first is you and what you've put in the water, your prompt, your question and your openness. The transition and need are words I use that make people more open to them because they're looking around in those circumstances. So my question for you is if it's a good question for you, is in your discussion, you tended to underplay your own involvement. And I'd like you to perhaps just talk about that.
Oh, did I? It's so common in my life. That's really interesting that you say that. It's so common in my life that I think about the ways in which I am a field waiting for these things to take root, right?
Hmm?
And that does make me very passive. That's a metaphor that makes me kind of completely passive. Um, but you're right. I posed the question, um, and I asked for the sign. And that isn't to say that every time you pose a question and ask for a sign, you're going to get something, or certainly get something that obvious. But but I do try to live my life in a way in which my perceptions are open, and
Yeah,
that means, and I've
and
had enough I've had enough of these experiences and enough positive reinforcement that it feels to me like another tool in my toolbox.
I'm going to ask you to comment on what you just said, um, and, because that's really an important part of all this. And I have something I'll be able to say, but
Yeah.
when you talk about explanations, which you just have been doing, you didn't include very directly what you just said, because it's a fundamental part of your being. Uh, but that's you. What does that say about you and other people?
I, You know, I don't know if I'm any different from other people, other than the fact that this has happened to me enough um, that it feels like a muscle that I exercise,
Yeah,
um, have exercised, and that uh, um, this has happened to me enough in meaningful ways that I've had no choice but to pay attention to it. I've had no
yeah.
choice
And
but to
so
kind of
since
understand
it's
it as a
since
facility.
since it's difficult for you to compare with other people, which I have done a lot of, kind of more going cross-sectionally,
Yeah.
uh, what we would call you as a high frequency coincider.
Wow, I love that. I am.
And not everybody is.
That's that's so interesting. I mean, a piece of it for me is also that I have a good memory in some ways. Like there are so many things, so many details of things I can't remember at all. Practical things in life. People will tell me, oh, back when you know, when we had the roof redone 10 years ago, and I'm like, oh, really? We had the roof redone 10 years? Like I don't remember that. But then there's this whole realm in which I have a strong memory, and in a certain way, like a broad knowledge and awareness and memory is kind of a creates more of a landing strip for a coincidence to happen. It's a bigger field of what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like a greater surface area on which um, coincidence can touch.
Which I'll translate into saying there are many different shapes and sizes in your memory bank that can match something that happens externally.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And so, and I'm aware of it enough now that I try to keep those shapes and sizes exposed, exposed to the elements as much as I
Yeah.
can.
So because it's fun to see these things and look at how you look at how I look at how you play with words, how
Mm.
you play with metaphors.
Yeah.
Um, and Erwin, I don't get to say this too often, but for you, for you, a little bit of this, it's like poetry. Um, they rhyme. You get there's your mother in your mind, and there's the sign with your mother. That's a direct rhyme. Sing and ring. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
hit. Some of them are more approximate than that.
Yeah.
There be sing and ding a ling ding or something that's more broad. I mean, even broader than that, but still has an overlap. So you have a facility in recognizing similarities.
Yeah, I also have a sense of when I'm in some kind of flow.
Okay, that's so important.
Um, I can tell you in a little bit about another. You and I, in a preliminary conversation, we're talking a little bit about Holocaust coincidence, and I have a story there that just happened over this last year. And a piece of it is about knowing stuff, so that the coincidences can land with some precision, and also about being in a kind of flow. Um,
Oh, well, why don't you go ahead with that one, and then maybe we'll get to the dream one that you were going to be talking about too.
you know what? We don't need to get back to that. The epilogue dream is not as people can read it in the book. It's not as relevant to
Well,
the
I
conversation.
wanted to ask about it just briefly. Then is that the epilogue? Sometimes people dream the same dream other people are dreaming, uh, and that's what I was wondering if this other person dreamt something like what you had dreamt,
No, they didn't. They had a dream where my mother came to them and asked them to convey a message to me.
something like
And
that.
and and I was so there was a part of me that was feeling really I'm just going to tell it. I'm not going to read it. It was feeling kind of annoyed, like who is this person? It's not someone who was close to me, and it was like if I had a dream like that, would I actually call the person if I barely knew them to say, "Your mother came to me in a dream"? I don't know that I don't know that I would. So the person called it.
Just just on that question, one of my patients
Yeah.
had a woman who was a kind of a seer beyond the realm of ordinary reality. She could download other people's minds. And she said, "Look, I don't know you very well. I kind of know you. Um, but your grandmother came to me as I was connecting with the dearly departed. And she told me a story about how you uh, didn't like to wear the white socks when you were 4 years old."
Do you have
And
any memory of this?
he did. Yeah, he knew that only his grandmother,
Oh,
and
I
he
see.
knew that.
Wow.
Only it was a way of making sure that he understood it was her grandmother talking, his grandmother talking, because the grandmother said, "Look, your mother was not very kind to you, and I know that. And now that she's with us, she has me communicating to you that she's sorry that she did that."
Wow. Wow. What a story. Yeah, and so again, these communications that have self-authentication mechanisms built in.
Yes, and that's the whole idea. I did this with a friend of mine. Her father came to me and told me some stuff about her. Um, and, and I said, "You want to know what your father told me?" And so had some coffee together, and both of them were three of them, and they were all right on for her. Like she was a very difficult child, she laughs, and she was running away, getting caught, coming back.
Huh.
And another thing too, about she can't love and be loved. She has blocks on those.
Yeah.
And so those are things that she knew. And so you need the authentication ones, and that's what this did. So anyway, please go on with the dream that you were telling us.
Oh, that dream. So it was just, yeah, somebody, a message, and he conveyed the message, which I didn't think was terribly important. I don't know. It still hasn't. The message itself, in his dream that my mother gave him, yeah, hasn't, I don't know. But I was a little annoyed, and I said to him, "So why do you think my mother would have come to you with this rather than coming directly to me?" And and he said, "Funny, I asked her that in the dream."
Good for him.
And she said, "He's so busy, I didn't want to bother him." Which my mother used to say to me all the time. She would leave me, voicemails. "I know you're busy. I don't want to bother you." That was like a phrase of hers that she would say. It would be the preliminary to any message she would leave me. Would be the sort of the apology for taking my time. And so it was another one of these things that was like, wow, was that just self-authentication
Yeah.
of that dream? In there's a dream, there's a prayer in Talmud. In the tractate called Brachot, or Blessings, has all of the dream lore in it. And in it there's a prayer that if you wake up from a dream and you're caught up in it and kind of don't know what to do with it, or you don't understand it, there's a prayer that you can offer, that's very beautiful. It's lengthy, but it's very beautiful, and it opens with, Master of the Universe, I've dreamed a dream and I don't know what it is. I don't know whether I was dreaming about myself, or I was dreaming about others, or others were dreaming about me.
Oh, good. That's a good one.
And that's how the prayer opens. And which is really an interesting idea of what our dreams might be. Like, when I dream at night, the fact that I'm dreaming it might not make it my dream. It might just
Yeah.
be my window into someone else's dream.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting concept that
Yeah.
I don't hear much, but Talmud is holding that as one
Oh,
of the ways
that's
to dream.
that's so good because Freud and Jung made it all about about the patient. Those are
Yes.
different parts of yourself.
But what is the connection? If we think about these states of flow or certain states of dreaming as access to some kind of greater collective,
Yeah.
some kind of consciousness, or something, or the crosstalk, the busy backstage dinner table, um, then it makes sense that in your flowing dream state, you're going to be open not only to what's going on inside of you, but what's going on with other people, what's going on with other beings.
And expand on that. What might be on with other beings that you dream about?
Um, well, if we think of the universe as having a kind of thorough aliveness, then that aliveness is doing its stuff. Um, so it might not be that there is a being in some kind of anthropomorphic sense, right? And when I use these metaphors, when I talk about the angel, the Talmud story of the angel telling the blade of grass to grow, like, I'm holding all of this as metaphor, as some kind of attempt to speak to this experience that so many of us have had, of tapping into something that's greater, or collective, something that's divine or not divine, but is beneath the surface. So it might not be that there is, an angel feeding you a dream, but it might be that sort of the collective dynamism of life is moving things around. And there you are as a recipient, or there you are as a witness. and to hold that, to take that role seriously, to be part of that conversation.
I think that's so important to bring up for me right now as I'm trying to understand the mind of the collective. I'm writing about the mind of the collective human organism, and more being able to see it as we're cells in this organism, and that we participate. And this is a form of participation, to be dreaming someone else's dream.
Yeah.
There are stories of people dreaming simultaneously the same dream or similar dreams,
Yeah.
and that's a step in that direction. But then this person dreaming about she was too busy. I asked her, but she was too busy. Uh, don't bother me. That's what you said to the guy. Don't bother me. I'm too busy. What makes you do this? Are you being like your usual too busy self that your mother's used to? Was the message from that guy?
Oh, it wasn't, the message itself was in some ways less important than the experience. It was something about, one of my kids and to keep an eye on something. And it didn't feel like the message itself didn't feel like new information. It felt like, oh, well, this is something I think about all the time anyway, something I care about and worry about already. I don't need to be told to care about it and worry about it. But it was the mechanism of the dream going to this person and then getting conveyed to me again with a self-authenticating feature, that was the piece that was remarkable.
And the message I got, I guess you're saying also, is that it reinforced the message you got in your dream, that your mother's still your mother wherever she is.
And also maybe there's another piece, if I were to interpret this dream, which is, why didn't my mother come to me? Why didn't the communication come directly to me?
You're too busy.
I'm too busy. So there's something about the busy mind. There's something here about um, maybe states of consciousness. Like while we're in our busy minds, unless we find ways to step out of the busy mind, uh, we're going to be more impervious to communications and to coincidences.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's another message that you don't seem to be heeding because you are relatively so open to this sort of thing.
Yeah, I've become more open. I experience has taught me to be open, to find the ways to be open. I do pay a lot of attention to my dreams, and I write them down whatever I can remember when I wake up, and that has helped train me into remembering them better.
Yeah,
But I, but look, I, I have a lot of connection with sort of ancestral energy. Like, I'm always very interested in family history, um, and I've made discoveries because of dreams I've had. So what does that mean? Is that information coming, or is it
yeah.
information I already had, but my busy mind doesn't even let me notice it's there? Um, I for decades I had a recurring dream, and uh, I kept noticing with amusement that I was having this dream over and over, and it was a dream where I'd be like in an airport, and I'd get on the wrong plane,
Hmm?
and the plane would land in Stuttgart, or I'd be on the right plane, but there was a mechanical difficulty, and we would land in Stuttgart. Or I'd be on the plane and it was hijacked, and we would land.
You're going in Stuttgart.
Well, and I'm thinking, why? Like, why? I don't have any connection with this place. In studying Hebrew Bible in 1980, there had just been a new and definitive scholarly edition of the Hebrew Bible that was published in Stuttgart that was called the Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia, because they would name it in Latin. And maybe it was because I thought the word Stuttgartensia was so ridiculous that it stuck somewhere in my brain. But anyway, over and over, I would have this dream, and it would always land in Stuttgart. And then I would always see myself walking on a street in Stuttgart, a particular street in Stuttgart. Um, no, I'm sorry, it wasn't a particular street in Stuttgart. It was a particular street in my mind, that I ended up finding really somewhere else. But uh, I was, my mother and father-in-law live in Israel, and I was planning a trip to go see them. And my husband suggested that I should, do a layover and spend a week in Europe somewhere, or a couple weeks, and take some time and do that. And I was trying to think, where do I want to go? What is
Stuttgart.
right now? And I hadn't thought about that dream in years. And that night, after posing the question, where should I go? I had the dream again. So I bought a plane ticket. I have a friend, who lives outside of Frankfurt. I said, I need to go explore something about this dream. Would you come with me to Stuttgart? And she said, yeah. And within another month of that, a series of dreams led me to discover where my Keller family, my father's family, came from, which we had never been able to do. We had never been able to jump back over the ocean, and to discover that I've got great great grandparents and great 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 grandparents who are buried in an existing, unharmed Jewish cemetery a half an hour out of Stuttgart. Um, and I already had the ticket to go. And so, again, it was one of those, uncanny experiences. Um, why was I telling you this? Anyway, that the persistence of that knock on the door took years, but finally, once I opened up to it, all this information came, all these discoveries came. I visited there again. I just took a sabbatical last year in that neighborhood. I told you that, I went to the opera in Wiesbaden, where your mother was from, because I've been hanging out in that corner of Germany and beginning to learn about these ancestors and about the people that didn't leave for America and what
Yeah,
happened.
they're always going back to Stuttgart because that's where they were.
And so can I tell you one more coincidence story that arises out of this?
Yes, and let me
Time is
let,
like,
let me make a comment on that.
oh yeah,
We got more, so we got some more time. Um, Erwin, one of your messages here that I'm hearing that in a kind of way you're skipping over, but kind of saying is that we have potentially more access to information than we realize. It's really hard for you to get that out in the direct statement that I am now making to you.
yeah,
Uh, so I'm hearing that, and the
yes,
reason
yes,
why
yes.
yes, the reason I'm saying that is because I just thought of that this morning as I was dreaming stuff and thinking about stuff and coming up with memories that I hadn't had for a while, a long time actually, and just seeing these videos of stuff that had happened. And because I'm working with AI and writing this next book, it has vast stores of information that it has access to. So by interacting with the AI, it's presenting me with a model for having access to more information than I believe that I currently have.
Oh, good. Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, what is, AI but a kind of hive mind, a kind of collective consciousness of data that exists on the internet, and I think that's a really good metaphor for um, what kind of collective consciousness there might be behind all of this separateness that we live with all the time. Um, and that the stuff is there. And that's, and when you were talking earlier about posing the question, those are the kinds of questions I pose. Like if there's something I'm really struggling to figure out, where what happened to so and so? What happened to, when I'm doing that kind of exploration about family, um, I pose the question. And posing the question is like asking AI. It's like asking ChatGPT. Um, and and then you see if the information comes in. And so often there is a lead that comes. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So I'll tell you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know you had something else, but the idea of recurrent dream is one thing. I'm trying to
Yeah,
say, Irwin,
yeah.
we got something to tell you here. Um, the way that the reasons it happened. I mean, you said, "Why do I'll go to Stuttgart? What do I have to do?" And you had some subsequent dreams. I think you said that told you where your grandparents were buried, or great grandparents were buried.
Yeah, maybe not. That told me dreams that told me a different way to look for this information on the internet.
Ah, I mean,
Woke up from
that's
the dream, and within 10 minutes, I knew the names of these ancestors and where they were buried.
so they gave you prompts for the internet. The dreams did.
Yeah, yeah, they gave me a mechanism. They gave me a method.
What was it?
Look, it was one piece of it was to not to go to google.com, but to go to google.de, to go to the German Google. And another piece of it was to do a search for that there were two names that I knew, but to do it in an and search so that I would only find the things that include both those names. And suddenly stuff became clear. I mean, and it wasn't, these were, these suggestions were not outlandish suggestions. I mean,
No,
they're that
but you
if,
you
yeah, that
wouldn't
I
have
could
thought
have
of
come
them.
up with.
Yeah,
Right, I
yeah,
could.
that's what I mean. You wouldn't have thought of them.
Well, I don't know. I could have thought of them, but I didn't. Like I could have thought of them, but I
Of,
didn't.
well, you can
Uh,
say that afterwards. It's
okay, maybe I couldn't think of them,
well,
but yeah,
however
and
that works, you hadn't thought of them, and you
so
needed the dream to give you information,
that
basic
one,
information.
yeah, that one was actually not a sleeping dream. That was kind of a trance. I was getting some energy healing work done. It was just after our big fires here. It was after I bought the Stuttgart tickets, and then we had these fires, and and everything was upside down because of the fires, um, and so I was in a very frenetic but also vulnerable state. And a congregant who does energy body work said, I would like to just offer you a treatment. And I did. And I had this whole sense of particular ancestors being there. She got done with me. She said, oh, yeah, I felt your mother here and your grandmother here. And I had felt my grandmother there too. And then I said goodbye to her. I went down to the lobby and I turned on my phone and did this search and got all this information. I hadn't even left the
Um,
building.
uh, to me, this is what you're describing is crucial here. Um, you the dream or the dream fugue state that you were in with the body work, plus you were discombobulated.
Yeah,
So you were wide open, and that increases openness to stuff when you're like that, because the
yeah.
busy mind is gone, or not busy, it's gone. So the body work and the question, uh, you got an answer that was very practical in being able to find out where your great grandparents were buried. It's
And there
amazing.
was so many discoveries so fast, documents and names and places that came pouring in after, um, you know, after a lifetime of everyone shrugging their shoulders when one would ask, where did great grandpa come from? And it poured in, and it was just such a sense of flow. I, I'm hesitant to tell this, but one of the one of these days that there was all of this discovery coming in, at some point I felt a little overwhelmed by it, and I said,
Yeah.
okay, I need to stop. And I picked up a deck of cards to play some solitaire. And I won the first game. And I shuffled, and dealt out, and I won the second game. And I shuffled, and I dealt it out, and I won the third game. And then I was so freaked out that I said, okay, I'm putting this away now. I'm gonna go take a walk. It was like there was this level of openness that I was unused to, like openness within my, during like a day that I was, you know, it wasn't in a dream state and it wasn't in a trance state. I was busy in my living room doing things. I would, and all of this was happening. And this influx of flow, I guess that's redundant, that's what influx means, but this flow and openness that was happening um, in the course of like the everyday, just like it knocked me over, and I had to try to shut off the tap.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And so some people you can get a little psychotic when that stuff happens, because you have to be able to shut it off, and some people can't. They get too caught up in it. So that's the other end of the openness, is
Yeah.
that the inability to turn it off. And we're coming to the end of our discussion today, Irwin. Uh, and as we end, I think the important thing I take away is that dreams, but also other states of mind, can give us access to information and potentials that we don't know we have. And what you exemplify, the guy who dreamt you're too busy one, these other where I can download information from a departed person, and other people do that often, that can be authenticated, that we have potential for communication and information absorption beyond what we are conventionally told we can have. And AI can be a model for our minds. Rather than being overwhelmed by it, we can take a lesson from it, and to say that we too can be like AI. And I haven't, and the idea that we have ability to communicate like this, like we can do visual telepathy, that that we have this capacity that the technology shows us that we have, so that it's possible to communicate with other people at a distance without having the technology.
Right.
So telepathy becomes yet more real.
Um, and so, yeah, I love this. There's the openness to it. There's the exercising of it, and I do think there's something about, in the places where you're interested, where there's more you want to know.
Yes, yes, big
Learning,
important.
learning as much as you can is also gives you more surface area for the coincidence to hit. I'm gonna try to do this in like 45 seconds. Um, this Holocaust coincidence that I mentioned. Through this whole family, these trips to Germany and the whole, I discovered that my grandfather, who shared a name with me, had a first cousin with whom he shared the same name. So again, my name, and this cousin had died in the Shoah in a horrible way. He had been in Dachau, and he was sent to this place in Austria called Hartheim, where they had been euthanizing people with disabilities. So it was it was a castle homegrown. I know the date that he was shipped. It was the beginning of a new operation. It was the third day of this operation. It was one small van of people that they shipped from Dachau to this place. They would have arrived and all gone into a gas chamber together. Um, I knew this. I visited these places. I knew details of it. And then last year I was living in Worms for a sabbatical, hoping to have all of this flow, hoping for revelation to happen, some prophecy to happen, and it wasn't. I was feeling really shut off, and I gave up on it. I was writing about it. I was like, okay, I came in with these big, ambitious, magical ambitions, and none of it has happened. And I had been there for like 3 weeks, and I took a walk, and they have the Stolpersteine, the little memorials at the homes of people who were taken out of those homes during the Holocaust. And I came across one again on a path that I had walked every single day for 3 weeks and hadn't noticed that it was there. And I stopped and I looked at this person's name, and it gave the information on May 8th, 1942, shipped from Dachau to Hartheim, murdered in Hartheim. And I realized he was on the van with my cousin. He was in the van with my cousin. And I am the only person in the world who would have known that upon looking at it. And I was kind of overwhelmed by this. Like, what was the value in my noticing it? Was it this person who needed to be witnessed? Was it my cousin finding a way to communicate with me, to say hello, like, I'm aware that you've learned all this stuff and this is the authentication? I don't know, but it was only able to happen because I knew so much about him.
Yeah, that's such an important point, Erwin, and a nice place for us to end. That if you restrict your information gathering, the likelihood of meaningful coincidences is reduced because you have to have stuff to match. And I hadn't really thought of that as clearly as you're making it. So I appreciate your making that clearer. The surface that you broaden with information allows more analogs, more similarities to be attracted to it, and that then pop up and say, what a coincidence it is that out there matches this in here, because it takes a lot of this in here to be able to find the matches out there. So I think that's a wonderful lesson for me and for our audience here. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for a scintillating discussion.
It's been fun. And I'm not a coincidence specialist, but you are, and just getting the chance to talk about this with you for an hour has been so exciting and so motivating for me.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I'm glad it was. It was educational for me in a lot of ways. Um, One of the things I really appreciated is, like, I saw that as an epigram to a book. A dream unopened is like a dream unexamined is like a letter unopened. You had a little different translation of that.
Yes.
And I said, you can't do that with all the dreams. And you came up with one out of 60, which is an answer to a question I've had for quite a long time. Not all of them have to be opened. It's
Right.
figure,
Not all of
figure.
them can, not all of them can be. Like, we don't have the minds to be able to find, like, what is metaphorical, what is meaningful here, literally, what's metaphorical here, what is just about mood and sensation. We don't have that capacity. And so the 1 in 60 allows you to let yourself off the hook in your meaning making.
Oh, but there's still meaning there. We just might not be able to find it. That's
Yeah.
the implication.
Right. And so if I can't find, and this goes back to that dream prayer I was telling you about,
Yeah.
which has something along these lines. If I can't find the meaning today, may this dream come back in another way that will allow me. So that it doesn't have to be that you need you need a fish on every hook. um,
You can't.
right,
Uh,
but I can't.
so
I don't.
may,
I don't understand it. So let it happen again in a way that's easier for me to get.
and it did, and you went to Stuttgart. So, so, so thank you very much, Erwin. It's it's been great talking with you. Thank you.
Great talking with you, Bernie. I appreciate it so much, and I love the podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you.